Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join T2 and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Martin Johnson.
And me, Dave Pendleton.
Dave, little pause there. Didn't think he was going to come in.
I nearly forgot my name for a moment.
You know it's bad when you nearly forget your name. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. You?
Yeah, good. Isn't it's busy time, isn't it? And I think having chance to do something like this is nice.
It is.
We try to keep the content going. We try and keep at least 3 or 4 a month. We managed that, and then we've had a bit of a lull for 3 or 4 weeks, so we're going to aim to get back in. But it's been some time since me and you have been in the podcast room as well.
Has indeed.
What do you want to talk about? We've had a little brief, haven't we? And we've had a laugh, and you're looking at me now because you're thinking we've got no prep for this. We talked about a concept for literally like 2 minutes.
When do we ever prep?
Yeah, we talked about this thing we're observing, particularly in a sales environment, for a couple of minutes, and then went right podcast room. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, what should we talk about?
So it's an interesting, I suppose it's an analogy, if you like. By experience and observation, and many, dozens and hundreds of hours sat with salespeople, observing, listening to, and so forth. And I suppose it kind of explains what happens to salespeople in those desperate days before the end of the month. Or, of course, if you're a quarterly person, those last couple of weeks before the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
What happens to salespeople's behavior? And if you like, I've given it a strapline that I'm calling Chasing the Cheetah.
Chasing the Cheetah. That is got this podcast is going to be called, but we might need a subheading to give people a clue about what we mean. Otherwise, they won't click on it, right? But we talk a lot at T2 about challenge and threat state mindsets. And we do it in the context of just normal performance psychology and self-awareness, but we apply it to leadership and we apply it to many different areas. But it definitely applies to sales, I think, Dave, more than any other department in any organization. Because, and for any listener out there who's familiar with challenge and threat, you'll know what we mean. If you're not, a very quick recap. A challenge state mindset is when people are focused on what they control, what they want to achieve, and therefore they attack it in a challenge state, productively and in the right manner, usually. In a threat state, people become consumed by the consequence of failing a task at hand. So they become incredibly avoidance-based, and they almost start, it's like that panic of time's ticking, and if I don't do this, there will be a repercussion, or if I don't achieve this, there will be a repercussion. And what we know in our testing and in research and science is that human beings cannot perform in a threat state as well as they can in a challenge, right? So let's come back to sales. Is there any other environment other than elite sport that we work in where the stakes are high, you win or you lose, right? Is there any other environment we work in other than sales where it is as threat state, i.e. you have a number to hit and you have a time frame in which to achieve it? And if you do, you're a hero and you'll be rewarded and celebrated. And if you don't, it will carry a level of exposure and pressure. And that's why I think when you call about chasing the cheetah, as the time ticks on, whether you're measured quarterly or monthly, because different people have different targets. Usually it's monthly, but some people measure people over a quarter.
Sure.
Whenever that said time is arriving, it's like your whole physiology, your biology, your chemistry changes. The pressure ramps up. The cortisol is released. The panic sets in. And you start to do stuff that is not you. That's what we observe in salespeople, isn't it? And it's usually driven by managers being on their case, organizations, communicating probably not very well around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, we're all susceptible.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. I was just, whilst you were talking there, I was just trying to think of another easy to understand example, and maybe people who are heading up big projects, really important projects with deadlines and budgets and, many aspects of logistics and things like that would probably experience something similar but it's so multifaceted that I guess it could dilute to a point. However, that sales guy in charge of his sales number as part of a sales team, it's just so glaringly obvious what happens when the messages and the narrative, I guess, get stronger from the management and leadership that, we need to make these numbers. If we don't make these numbers, there's potential problems. And we all know what happens when salespeople get that message. Yeah, absolutely. We start to cut corners.
Yeah.
We start to speed up. And we start not to attend to things that we should be attending to in such detail, because we are so desperately chasing something that actually can easily outrun us, because the faster we run, the faster it runs away from you. So in terms of the whole concept is just about either one or two things: either be much more controlled around your behavior and doing the very best you can do and getting there or not, or actually just realizing that you're not going to get there, coming to terms with not getting there, understand why you've not got there, and make a better plan for what you can do next month.
Yeah. And on that, because it links in, I've got a personal experience of this at Gartner. And I've said this before when we've delivered sales training or delivered other sorts of training. The best manager I ever worked for was a Spanish woman called Maite Roel. She was a wonderful VP at Gartner and a great coach more than a manager, if anything. And I was coming towards the end of a sales year, not month or quarter. So we do still have monthly and quarterly targets, but the end of the sales year was massive because it carried with it the ultimate prize, which was what we called Winner Circle. Winner Circle was top 10% globally, go to a flash trip in a foreign country with your partner. We're talking Sydney, the Bahamas, these destinations around the world. And I'd made Winner Circle 2 years in a row, and it was the third year. And I was coming to the end of my year. It was December the 15th or something, and I had literally 10 working days left to make my number. And I was one big deal away. And I only had one big deal left in the pipeline, and it had been going on for months. And this client had promised me it will happen. And at this point, they'd gone quiet on me for 2 weeks. They'd stop answering my emails. They'd stop answering my calls, right? So if I'm honest, I look back and I was getting desperate. I was becoming a stalker. I was sending 3 emails a day, leaving 2 voicemails. My language was getting more abrupt and directive. I was, but I couldn't see it at the time because all I was focused on is the prize and what I needed to do and getting over the line. So I went to Maite and I said to her, listen, and I was chimping off and I said, listen, this client has promised me this and they've let me down and they're going to cost me my Winner Circle and I don't know what to do. And she said, Martin, calm down. She said, sit down. I said, yeah. She went, if you was a manager and somebody in your sales team came into you with this exact same problem and laid it all out like you just laid it out to me, what advice would you give to them? And I went, that's not helpful, Maite. I'm coming to you for advice. I don't, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't be here. She went, no, just calm down. Think about it. If you heard that story that you've replayed or somebody replayed it to you as a manager, what would you be thinking? And I went, well, if you want the honest answer, it's probably not going to be a good one. She went, no, what would you say? I said, well, I'd probably say there's 10 days left. They've gone quiet on you for 2 weeks. Something is missing in this sales cycle, in this process.
Resolution of concerns.
Yep. The harder you push, the more you will lose it. In fact, you may have already gone across the line, right, by the sounds of it. So I said, I'd probably say the deal's not going to happen. You ain't going to Winner Circle. Calm your jets and crack on and find out what's missing and have a fighting chance of actually keeping this sale for the new year or whatever it might be. And she turned around to me and looked at me and she went, and there's your answer. And it was almost like master the art of emotional detachment in a nutshell. It was the best lesson ever. And I sunk in my seat. I thought, God, she's bang on.
She's right.
And it was the first time in 2 weeks that I'd actually saw the situation for what it was and the reality of it.
Yep.
And I didn't go to Winner Circle that year and I didn't make it. And I was never going to, Dave. But my behavior was becoming so driven and erratic by my ability to convince myself that I could force this over the line somehow. And when you think about it, it's ludicrous, isn't it?
It is.
And I think that's an example of what we're talking about, aren't we?
Exactly.
You can ruin friendships, you can ruin relationships, you can blast deals out of the water, you can risk long-term business from that type of behavior. But let me ask you this question, Dave. It's easier said than done, because when you are a salesperson and you're trying to think rationally and qualify out as much as you're qualifying in, but you have an organization and a manager saying, pick up the phone, close the deals, one big push, don't take no for an answer. What do you do? It has to be a brave person to push back and say, no, this isn't going to happen like this.
Well, all those things you just said, let's have one big push and all the rest of it. There's no reason why you still shouldn't do that. It's just about the behaviors that you use to have that one last push.
Okay, so what you're saying is, don't give up the fight. And as a salesperson, your job is to try and close that deal until the very end. But it's the manner in which you do so which needs checking.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And you've just highlighted the point exactly. You couldn't see what was going on because you was on the inside, desperately trying to get that deal over the line because of the reward at the end of it, which was winner's circle, right? So you couldn't comprehend not going for a third year in a row because of the way it felt for a start, because it was an amazing reward, and potentially because of the way it looked to peers, colleagues, and leaders and managers. You'd been there 2 years in a row, not to make it 3. How did that look to the world? So there was an awful lot of threat driving your behavior. And it was thinking about the fear of the consequence of failure, which was not being there, not feeling the reward, not getting the reward, rather than what's the best course of action to get the deal over the line, if we can get it over the line. And, what your leader said to you was incredibly wise, almost Jedi-like. Taught you a real valuable lesson there about perspective, right?
Yeah, and she, listen, there's nobody more under the pump who wanted the deal more than her.
Absolutely.
For her region and figures and etc. But I think what happened in the end, by memory, is I ended up leaving it for 2 or 3 days. And then right before Christmas, I ended up emailing the client and just said, listen, looking back on the last couple of weeks, I've probably become borderline stalkerish, smiley face. I do apologize. Look, I was trying to hit me winner circle and this deal was pending on it. However, clearly there's some challenges, and whatever those challenges are, I just want you to know, I'd like to talk through them in the new year, see if we can work through them. But for now, just want to wish you a Merry Christmas. And they responded. And I think he said, Martin, I really apologize. I have seen all your emails and communications. If I'm honest, I wanted to try and make this work as well. But for these reasons, we can't get it over the line right now. However, it's not dead. We will pick it up in the new year. Sorry to let you down type thing. And we both sort of had that. I sort of realized in a moment that actually the reason he wasn't responding to me is because he'd promised me something that then he couldn't deliver on. And he felt incredibly guilty about it. And so it all worked out in the end. And I can't quite recall whether in the new year and beyond it came off or not. But I guess the point we're saying, Dave, here is you've got to check yourself if you feel you are wandering down a road that you're not going to be able to come back from.
That's it.
Because the minute you become that, I mean, I've seen some incredibly aggressive behavior from salespeople before, pushy behavior.
Same.
It never really. I mean, what's interesting is I worked with a salesperson once who he was his numbers were phenomenal, but he was a force of nature, and he would openly say they either come in just to get rid of me, or I piss them off and never hear from them again. But I'm cool with that. I get an answer either way. I wouldn't recommend that, right?
Not so much.
But that was his philosophy, right? It's like he used to actually say it on the phone. I used to actually hear him say on the phone. Claire will vouch. He used to work with us. He used to say, "Well, listen, come on, sign the paperwork and you can get rid of me." And laugh about it. And actually, I can imagine them on the end of the phone sort of going, "It might be worth me signing 10 grand off just to get rid of him." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it takes a certain type of personality to get away with that. But okay, Dave, if I was to say this, then let's get a bit practical on this podcast, and I'm putting you on the spot, but maybe we can bounce off it. If we was to try and say, what are the indicators that would stipulate you crossing the line? What are the things that you need to check yourself on where you say, if you find yourself doing this, something's not right, you need to step back? What would you say those are? I mean, let's start with email.
Yeah, I think maybe the frequency of communication, because, you know, whilst all deals are different, all customers are different in terms of how regularly you need to contact, you know, how regularly you need to check in and so forth. You would probably have a good idea if you're going over the regular frequency. You know, so if you're a relatively friendly customer who it's okay to speak to 3 or 4 times a week, potentially, to check in, see how things are moving on, see what else you need, then if you're finding yourself doing 5, 6, 7 times a week, then, you know, you're going over the frequency. If you're a bit more of a standoff customer who maybe just will tolerate 1 email a week because of traffic or decision-making processes or whatever else, and you find yourself doing it 4 or 5 times a week, then you know you're going over the frequency. Most customers have a communication frequency that most salespeople will understand. So if you feel yourself going over the frequency, I think that's the first indicator.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then to just tie into that, I would also say the nature of the emails within that frequency.
The nature of the communication is the next one, absolutely.
Because you can see, if you look at the last 5 emails and you got them up next to each other, you can probably see a difference in the directness, the shortness, the bluntness, the desperation,
absolutely,
all of that. It'll turn from, "Hi Dave, how are you doing? Just checking in as we agreed. Did you manage to have a chat with the FD? Did you manage to have a chat with the FD? Are we good to go? Anything else you need from me?" And then you fast track 5 emails on, and it's like, "Dave,
what's going on?
Yeah, I know you're really busy. I know you're clearly incredibly busy. We all are, you know." And it's like little microaggressions that start to creep into your emails.
Yeah, definitely.
And they get a little bit more desperate. So I say, check in with the frequency, but also check in on the nature of them as well.
Definitely.
Anything else that would be worth them spotting in their personal behavior or the way they're operating that might just indicate that they're chasing the cheetah?
Yeah, I think definitely agitation, you know, and patience, a complete lack of patience. So still thinking about communication, the response time, because when you're in a good place and you're not chasing those numbers and cheaters and so forth, then, you know, you're much more patient in waiting for the return communication from said person at the other end. Whereas when you start to chase it, your patience levels get much shorter. So you find yourself checking your emails, refreshing your emails every 3 or 4 minutes to see if that email has landed. And when it hasn't, it causes frustration.
Yeah.
So I think that's another behavioral tell.
Yeah. I'd also say one of the tells is that you're likely to then stop doing other activities that you would usually do.
Yeah.
So, you know, you become consumed by it, like you say, and therefore you're not taking your mind elsewhere to do some new activity or to check in on other clients or to do your admin or your expenses or your pipeline update or whatever it might be, which would usually be an essential part of taking you away from that one emotive situation and deal that means a lot to you. You know, so yeah, how much other activity you're doing in the day that would probably distract you or take you away from it is probably another tell.
I would think as well, you're probably going to start frustrating the people around you.
Yeah, your colleagues are going to start getting pissed off with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And your leader probably will observe this sort of heightened level of frustration. So I think it's going to transmit all these negative behaviors as well, I think.
What about one of the biggest indicators for me is you start suggesting meaningless, ludicrous offers. So so all of a sudden, right, the client's not even come back to you and gone, "It's too expensive," or you know, "We're worried about the longevity, the sustainability of the product in our organization," or whatever it might be. You've not even had an objection, and you're sat with your manager going, "What if we did a 20% discount and we spread the cost over 2 years?" And it's like, well, that might be that might get it over the line, but it might be completely irrelevant. And you position it, and it's just, you know what I mean? We start trying to cut, and I've done it myself.
Yeah.
What if, just to draw them in and land them and entice them in? I mean, we're talking sometimes about 50 grand, right? If the gig or the service or the product or whatever is of high value, you're talking a big investment. And we're trying to hook them on the last day of the month by going, I'll give you 10% off for 5 grand. So you still got to pay 45.
Yeah.
It's still a £45,000 investment. And whatever's stalling it is still going to be a problem.
It's still going to stall it.
It doesn't matter, right? But I think a big indicator that you're chasing the cheetah is when you're just coming up with ludicrous suggestions that, God, may or may not be even relevant to them. Do you know what I mean?
Probably start overthinking it as well. What's gone wrong? Is it that person? Is it this person? Is it that person that's put a spanner in the works? You know, because it's never about the salesperson, right?
Yeah.
It's always the customer that's causing the problem.
I mean, usually we talk about it in sales training. At this point, there's usually a couple of things missing. Rather than come up with deals and offers and ludicrous suggestions to try and hook the big one on the last day of the month, rather than pissing your colleagues off, rather than becoming a stalker, rather than, you know, doing all the things we're talking about, you're best off putting the time and energy and effort into reassessing that deal. We used to have a thing at Gartner called a value prompter. It was part of value selling. You'd have a value prompter where you'd put a deal through what we call this process of a value prompter. And it was designed to say, right, let's just assess the health of this deal. Are we at the power? Number one.
Yeah.
Are we at the decision maker? Yes. Okay. Tick.
Yeah.
Right. Have we uncovered the pain points or the business outcomes that our products or service is going to deliver for the customer? Yeah, absolutely. Tick. Have we established budget? Not really. Question mark. Right?
Yeah.
Do we have time frames mutually agreed with the client on email? No. Question mark. So then you start to go, so it's not that we're not at the power, and it's not that we're not going to add value, but we don't have clear mutually agreed time frames, and we've not established a clear capital budget for this. The sticking point could lie in those two. So when you communicate to the client, your communication could be around that, and not, are you going to sign the paperwork, time's ticking, what do I need to do to get this over the line? You know, can I just check, Dave? We've not really agreed time frames, so I don't want to be working at different time frames for you. So just, you know, let me know, where are you in the process and what we would need to do next, just so I'm aligned with it. Or, you know, I can't help but think that we haven't established a clear budget for this. Are you trying to secure some capital expenditure? And if so, do you need any more material from me for the FD?
Sure.
Or is this going in OPEX? And it's already budgeted for, and it's just a process of procurement. You know, your communication can start to be driven by the gaps in the deal rather than your desperation. Does this make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
And I always encourage sales teams to have a deal review mechanism where you put it through 5 bits of criteria and you answer honestly which one can we tick and which one is a question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And you know, in different terminology, what we would suggest there is that we haven't moved the buyer through the resolution of concerns effectively enough as a salesperson. So we've got them to the point where we've built value, demonstrated capability, and so forth. We know there's a match, but nobody's ever actually taken the time to stop and say, right, what's going to stop this moving forwards? And that's exactly what you're talking about. The tool that you would put it through to measure its value is exactly the same sort of thing as saying, right, what's going to stop this moving forwards? And have that dialogue with the customer, with the buyer. And if they say, well, we haven't quite worked out the budget yet, that's going to form exactly the same end result. So if we haven't formed the budget yet, then it's not going to move forward until the budget's formed. So there's no point in trying to push it.
Yeah. You don't have to do this in a tool like a value prompter where you actually write down. You can do it on a call with 4 people, different stakeholders from around the business.
That's right.
Who are impartial. We used to do these things called DRBs. DRBs was deal review boards. Yeah. And a DRB was meant to be a half an hour Zoom. You get the salesperson, the sales manager, the product specialist, whoever's been involved in it. And you go, right, let's ask questions around this deal.
Yeah.
What might be missing? Where are we at? What do we need to clarify, etc.? And quite often the person who's least involved in the sale on that call uncovers the point.
Yeah.
Because they have nothing to do with it. They're impartial. It's almost like an idiot's line of questioning, but they'll ask something absolutely basic where the salesperson will just have that moment and go, shit, no, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I do.
So
yeah.
DRBs are a great way to, or deal review boards or value prompters, whatever it might be, are a great way to be able to review that. Right, as we come to the end of this then, Dave, Chasing the Cheetah.
Chasing the Cheetah.
So what are the takeaways? Be aware of when you're crossing the line and behaviors.
Absolutely.
Go back and review what might be happening, what might be missing, rather than fall into a period of desperate behavior and actions.
Absolutely.
And if you're unsure, ask the most impartial person, hold a deal review board, and act accordingly. And if you miss your target, you miss your target, and sales managers won't be happy with that.
No.
But if we live to fight another day, that's the better outcome, right?
Absolutely, it is, yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Enjoyed that, Dave.
Good stuff.
And we'll be back shortly with another T2 Hubcast.